"The alarm's lying," the manager shouted. "System glitch, ignore it." His voice cracked against the rising siren. The lights flickered, red and frantic, spilling across the marble lobby. People froze, uncertain whom to believe. Then the pianist, quiet, steady, rose from his bench, brushed the dust from his jacket, and said evenly, "Everyone needs to move now." He didn't shout. He didn't look panicked. Yet his tone cut through chaos like a tuning fork through noise. And for reasons none of them could name, people obeyed. Because before he ever sat beneath hotel chandeliers, he'd spent nights guiding air bases through real flames. By the way, where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments below. What they didn't see was that this wasn't just a hotel. This was the last place his unfinished song still lived, the melody he'd played every night for the woman who never showed. And before the night ended, she'd walk through the smoke and hum it beside him. He'd learned to trust alarms more than people. That was the first thing years of service had taught him. So while others waited for confirmation, he acted. Calm was muscle memory, not courage. He'd moved his daughter to safety, instructed staff to open exits, and silenced the manager's protests with a single, quiet glance. No one here knew who he'd been. They only knew the music. Hours earlier, that same calm had filled the empty lounge. He'd sat at the piano beneath low amber lights, playing the same incomplete melody he'd written 12 years ago. It had no ending, only a pause that waited for a harmony that never came. The regulars called it the waiting song. He didn't correct them. Every night after guests retreated upstairs and cleaning carts rolled across marble, he played it once through. Not for the crowd, not for the tips, for the silence that followed. That silence was the closest he came to peace. His daughter, Lydia, would draw nearby, using napkins and dull pencils. She always said the song felt like rain just before thunder. Tonight, thunder lingered in the walls, electric hum, faint and unstable. Renovation crews had been testing new circuits all week. He'd noticed the flicker, the subtle lag between key lights and backup relays. He'd mentioned it to the staff once, gently. They'd smiled politely, thanked the pianist for his concern, and moved on. He didn't argue. People rarely listen to the ones in uniforms that come without collars. He'd learned that too. The hotel itself was a study in contrasts: glass, gold trim, and exhaustion. Guests carried lives too loud to hear the pianist who played for them. Management praised ambiance, never realizing how deliberate his timing was, the rhythm of entry, the cadence of footsteps, the way sound softened tension. It was instinct from years spent monitoring radio static for signs of distress. Every note meant something. Every silence did too. When the last table emptied, he took a sip of lukewarm coffee, checked the time, just past midnight, and began again. The first chord always hurt a little. It opened something. His fingers moved with precision born of repetition, but the melody was not rote. It was memory disguised as music. Behind him, Lydia sketched another silhouette of him at the piano. She was 9, sharp-eyed and quiet like him. "You always stop before the end," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "Maybe I'm waiting for someone to finish it." She didn't press. Children rarely do when they sense grief older than themselves. What he didn't know was that the person he'd waited for, the voice behind that unwritten harmony, was already in the building. She'd arrived under a different name, reviewing the renovation she'd designed, unaware of the man playing beneath her floor. For now, though, the night still belonged to repetition, to the soft pulse of piano keys and a man trying to live quietly after a life that had been anything but. He packed his sheet music, though he never read it anymore, and set his coffee aside. Tomorrow, the same melody would return. He'd play it again, same hour, same seat. Routine wasn't boredom, it was containment. Outside, lightning arced across the sea. He didn't see it. Inside, the electrical hum deepened, subtle and unnoticed by anyone except him. He heard it, different pitch, unstable current. He glanced up at the chandeliers, each flicker aligning with a missed beat in his own song. He frowned, almost amused. "You'll burn yourself out one of these nights," he murmured to the lights, not knowing how right he was. When he finally closed the lid of the piano, the reflection staring back wasn't a man content with obscurity. It was someone waiting for the next signal, the next order, even if it would never come. Upstairs, footsteps echoed, new guests checking in, laughter sharp against polished marble. Life kept moving. So did he. He placed a hand over the piano's wood surface, the same way soldiers used to rest a palm on aircraft fuselage before takeoff. Habit, superstition, respect, it was all the same. The piano was his command station now, and the song was his call sign. Tomorrow night, he'd play it again. And by the end of that song, everything he thought was buried would rise to the surface. The woman, the past, the fire. But for now, he turned off the lights, leaving only the hum of the circuits, the sound that would soon become alarm and smoke and revelation. And above him, in a suite redesigned by a woman named Marina Vale, someone hummed the same unfinished melody in her sleep, unaware that she'd already answered a call sent 12 years ago. Morning light cut through the salt-streaked windows, bleaching the hotel lounge in pale gold. The piano sat silent, closed, its wood gleaming like still water. He wiped the keys every morning, though he wouldn't play again until nightfall. It wasn't about cleanliness. It was ritual, like checking instruments before a mission. He believed small routines held chaos at bay. That belief was why the world hadn't broken him yet. He'd finished his second coffee when footsteps echoed behind him, heels, confident, measured. "We'll need to reroute the wiring along this beam," said a woman's voice. It carried command the way certain people carried perfume, noticeable even when not directed at you. He glanced up. The architects had arrived. She was the last through the door, hair pinned neatly, rolled blueprints under one arm, phone in the other. She didn't notice him. No one ever did in daylight. He was part of the background, like a lamp, like the soft hum of a compressor. He liked it that way. But something in her voice, an inflection, caught him off guard. A familiar rhythm he couldn't place, like a melody heard once and half forgotten. He frowned, brushed the thought aside. He watched as she moved through the lobby, issuing instructions to the foreman about structural load and aesthetic lines. She spoke fluently, her gestures economic. She knew this place the way a conductor knew a score. The manager hovered, eager to please, nodding at every word. He returned to polishing the piano. When she paused beside him to survey the layout, he caught the faintest scent of citrus and graphite. The same combination he remembered from a night long ago, when he'd waited in a café that smelled of rain and drawing pencils. He straightened unconsciously, then forced himself back to work. Coincidence, he thought. Nothing more. "Could you move that instrument slightly toward the east column?" she asked the staff, eyes still on her plans. "It's heavy," one of them muttered. "I'll do it," he said quietly. Before they could respond, he adjusted the angle himself, precise and steady. The piano shifted cleanly into place. He didn't grunt or strain. The motion was practiced, almost graceful. She looked up, finally noticing him. "Thank you," she said, polite but distracted. Her gaze lingered half a second longer than courtesy required, as though something about his posture didn't fit the job. Then her phone rang, and the moment dissolved. He exhaled, slow. Habit again. Control the breathing, keep heart rate low. He'd trained soldiers that way once, before his life became sheet music and silence. When the architects left, the manager strutted over. "She's from Vale Designs," he said, adjusting his tie. "Top firm in the state. We're lucky to have her. Try not to bother them, they like discretion." He nodded. He'd been invisible long enough to know that silence was its own armor. Still, her name tugged at him. Vale. It brushed memory like a finger on a wound. He hadn't heard that word aloud in over a decade. By afternoon, the work resumed. Lydia arrived from school, slipping into her usual corner near the bar, sketchbook in hand. "You look strange," she said without looking up. "Just tired." She tilted her head. "You only say that when you're thinking." He smiled faintly. "Then I'm thinking tired thoughts." She rolled her eyes, went back to drawing. He leaned on the piano, watching sunlight move across the marble floor. Everything looked normal, but he could feel an imbalance in the building's rhythm. The new wiring buzzed faintly through the columns. Too much interference. He could almost hear it behind the walls, a faint static, irregular, like a pulse skipping a beat. "Dad," Lydia said softly, "you're doing that listening thing again." He blinked, refocusing. "Just making sure the piano's in tune." She didn't believe him. She rarely did when he downplayed the world. That evening, he spoke to one of the electricians checking the panels. "You might want to recheck the grounding near the chandelier circuit," he suggested. The man laughed. "You play music, I play with voltage. We'll stick to our instruments." He said nothing more. He'd learned that warnings lose power when offered twice. As twilight bled into the lobby, he prepared for the night's set. The staff dimmed lights, guests filtered in, conversations blending into low hum. The air thickened with perfume and expectation. He sat at the bench, cracked his knuckles quietly, and began. The melody unfolded, soft, deliberate, haunting. The same unfinished song, same pauses, same ache. People clapped politely between cocktails, unaware they were sitting inside someone's memory. Upstairs, in a suite strewn with design drafts, Marina Vale reviewed lighting schematics, frowning at the faint power fluctuations on her monitor. The wiring team had insisted it was stable. Still, she felt uneasy. She pushed open the window for air, and the distant piano reached her, a familiar tune threading through the sea wind. She froze, pulse quickening. She'd only heard it once through a voicemail left 12 years ago by a man she never met but never forgot. The song without an ending. Her throat tightened. She shut the laptop, listening harder. The melody faded into the murmur of the lobby below. She exhaled, shaken, unable to explain the coincidence. Downstairs, the pianist finished the piece, hands resting still on the final chord that wasn't truly final. He glanced toward the ceiling, where faint light from the upper floors spilled through latticework. Something told him the person he'd written it for was closer than memory allowed. He closed the lid gently, unaware that the name Vale wasn't just coincidence at all, but the first ripple in a wave that would soon test everything he'd built to keep the past quiet. By the next morning, the hotel had resumed its rhythm, all polish and polite greetings, but something beneath the surface had changed. She, Marina Vale, had heard that song again, and it followed her down the halls like a scent. It wasn't coincidence anymore. The notes had shaped themselves exactly as she remembered them, soft then rising, suspended before resolution. She told herself it was simply a pattern, not a message. Yet, when she stepped into the lounge and saw the pianist bent over the keys, testing the pedals, the denial faltered. He noticed her only because she paused at the corner of his vision. She was observing the room's acoustics, clipboard in hand, but her stillness felt deliberate. Lydia sat nearby, her sketchbook open on her knees, drawing the chandelier with quick, light strokes. The woman spoke first, her tone professional. "You're here early. Maintenance or performance?" "Habit," he said. The strings shift with humidity. Her brows lifted slightly, as if impressed that a simple hotel pianist could phrase it like a craftsman, not a hobbyist. "Makes sense. The air's thicker since the storm." She lingered longer than she meant to, watching his hands move over the silent keys. He wasn't playing, just pressing, testing resistance. Yet the motion stirred something old and unfinished inside her. She left abruptly, muttering something about reports. When she'd gone, Lydia looked up from her sketch. "She's the designer, right?" He nodded. "The architect. She looked like she knew your song." He smiled at that, a small, uncertain thing. "Maybe she's heard it before." Lydia's eyes brightened. "You mean on the radio?" "No," he hesitated. "I mean in another time." She tilted her head, trying to understand, then shrugged and went back to drawing. Children accepted mysteries adults tried to name. Later that afternoon, a staff meeting filled the lobby. Renard Hale, the manager, gathered everyone to prepare for inspection. His tone was brisk, impatient. "We need absolute cooperation with the design team. This renovation defines our brand. That includes you, Mr. Train. Keep the music subtle, nothing too melancholy during the investor visit." "Yes, sir," he said quietly. "Good. And if they request silence, comply immediately." Lydia frowned from her seat. After the meeting, she whispered, "He talks to you like you're one of the chairs." He chuckled. "Chairs don't get tired. I'm doing fine." "Doesn't seem fair," she said. "It doesn't have to be fair. It just has to stay calm." That night, the investors toured the upper floors. The piano stayed closed, the lounge hushed except for murmured conversations. Marina moved through the space, leading the inspection, pausing to exchange nods with Renard. He gestured toward the pianist. "This is Elias Train, our in-house musician. Keeps things elegant." She extended a hand. "We've met briefly." He shook it lightly. Her palm was cool, steady. "The wiring stable?" he asked, glancing at the ceiling. "Mostly. There's been minor fluctuation, but nothing dangerous," she replied. "We're replacing the main circuit panel tomorrow." He nodded. "Good. The backup lights flicker on a 5-second delay. Could confuse guests during an outage." Her gaze sharpened, curious. "You notice timing that precisely?" "It's part of my job," he said simply. Renard laughed. "He's meticulous. You'd think he ran an orchestra instead of background music." She smiled faintly, but didn't laugh. Something about his tone, a mix of admiration and quiet endurance, didn't fit the stereotype. Before she could ask more, her phone buzzed again, calling her upstairs. She excused herself. As she left, Lydia piped up, "She walks like she's counting steps." He smiled. "Architects do that." Later, while the lounge emptied, the cleaning crew chatted near the bar. One of them, a new hire named Theo, leaned toward another. "Heard the piano guy used to be military," he whispered. "Some kind of communications expert. Guess he's slumming it now." The other scoffed. "If that's true, he must have screwed up bad to end up here." Their laughter was quiet but cruel. Lydia heard every word. She looked toward her father, waiting for a reaction. He didn't move, didn't flinch. He simply kept tuning the keys, adjusting tension, acting as though the remarks dissolved into the air like dust. When they left, she asked, "Is it true? Were you really in the military?" He met her eyes and nodded once. "A long time ago. Then why do you play here?" He considered. "Because some battles end, and others, you choose to fight differently." She studied him, then quietly slipped one of her sketches into his coat pocket, the one she'd drawn of him at the piano, surrounded by faint smoke, though she couldn't explain why she'd added it. He noticed later, smiled faintly, and left it there. Upstairs, Marina reviewed reports by the dim desk lamp. Her concentration broke every few minutes as fragments of that same melody echoed faintly through her mind. She tried to dismiss it, but the more she did, the clearer it became. She finally gave in and hummed a single line under her breath. The sound matched perfectly with what she'd heard downstairs. Somewhere below, the man who'd written it paused mid-practice, sensing something shift. He couldn't hear her voice through floors of concrete, but somehow the air felt lighter, like a signal traveling on a familiar frequency, waiting for acknowledgement. The rain started before sunset, thin, whispering sheets against the hotel's glass facade. Guests hurried through the revolving doors, bringing the scent of wet pavement and sea air. He adjusted the piano bench, waiting for the evening to settle into its usual rhythm. The storm would thin the crowd, which he preferred. Fewer voices meant more room for the music to breathe. He'd been running the same melody all week, though tonight something inside him shifted. The notes wanted to resolve. The song had lived half-finished for 12 years, ending on a pause that wasn't quite rest. He could almost hear the harmony now, as if the air itself were answering him. Upstairs, Marina Vale stood at the window of her suite, watching the rain trace lines over the glass. She was supposed to be editing design plans, but her focus dissolved every time the piano began below. The melody drifted up the stairwell, filling the architectural void she'd created when she'd designed the open lobby. It wasn't background noise. It was memory calling from beneath the floors. She tried to dismiss it again, but tonight the pull was too strong. The longer she listened, the more certain she became. That song wasn't coincidence. It was the same tune she'd heard through a voicemail 12 years ago, from a man named Elias Train, the blind date who'd waited while she rushed her brother to emergency surgery and then vanished from his life before she could explain. Her chest tightened. She still remembered deleting his follow-up message unread because guilt had already rewritten the story for her. Better he think she wasn't interested than know she'd failed someone that night. She'd built a career since then, learned to manage structures and steel, but not regret. And now, the sound that anchored that memory was alive again, below her. She grabbed her umbrella, telling herself she just needed to check the acoustics in the lounge. Work, not nostalgia. When the elevator doors opened onto the lobby, she hesitated. The place glowed in soft amber, almost empty except for a few guests and the pianist. He sat with a posture too disciplined for entertainment work. Straight spine, even shoulders. Focus that came from training, not habit. The song began again, quiet and patient. Every chord was deliberate, balanced between melancholy and control. She moved closer without realizing it. At the final suspended note, he paused, fingers hovering above the keys, waiting for something unseen. It was instinct that made her hum. Barely a breath at first, the harmony she'd written once into the margins of her college notebook. He froze. The sound barely carried, yet it struck like recognition does, not through hearing but through bone. He turned his head slowly, eyes searching until they found her near the column. For a second, he didn't breathe. The years fell away, leaving only a fragment of the café he'd waited in, and the voice that had promised to meet him there. The last chord slipped beneath his hands, transforming the pause into completion. Then he stood. "You know that song," he said quietly. She swallowed. "I used to." He looked at her like someone decoding a message through static. Then he gave a small nod, as if confirming something privately. "The storm carries sound differently. You can hear things clearer." I didn't mean to interrupt," she said, her voice uneven. "It just sounded familiar." He smiled faintly. "That's what memory does, makes echoes feel like first times." Lydia peeked from her corner sketching table, sensing tension she didn't understand. She saw her father standing near the woman from the blueprints and stayed silent, instinctively protective. Marina turned to leave, embarrassed by how shaken she felt, but before she could, the lobby lights flickered once, then steadied. A faint crackle followed, a hum through the chandelier wiring. He glanced up immediately. "That's not the storm," he murmured. She frowned. "We've been having power issues since the circuit reroute. It's stable enough." "It's not stable," he said quietly, moving toward the control panel near the bar. "That delay and flicker means residual current somewhere ungrounded." Renard, the manager, emerged from his office annoyed. "Mr. Train, please don't meddle with maintenance equipment. The engineering team has this handled." Elias stepped back, palms open. "Understood." Marina glanced between them. The manager's tone rubbed her wrong, but she stayed silent. When Elias returned to the piano, she caught the smallest change in his expression. Focus sharpened into vigilance. Whatever he'd seen or heard, he hadn't let it go. The storm outside deepened, lightning scattering blue reflections across the glass walls. Guests murmured nervously. The air grew charged, too heavy for comfort. He resumed playing, but his eyes flicked occasionally to the ceiling lights, measuring rhythm against the electrical pulse. Marina took a seat nearby, pretending to check notes on her tablet. Her fingers, though, tapped unconsciously to his tempo, the same pattern she'd once mapped onto blueprints when designing sound chambers. It was absurdly intimate, this silent collaboration neither had planned. When the song ended, he closed the piano and exhaled. "You designed this place," he said, not as a question. "Yes," he nodded. "You gave it good acoustics." She hesitated. "You give it heart." For a heartbeat, the past hovered between them, unspoken but alive. Then Renard reappeared, breaking the spell. "We'll need you both out of here soon. Safety inspection tomorrow, no guests allowed after 11. Elias simply said, "Of course." She gathered her tablet, forcing composure. "Good night, Mr. Train." He inclined his head. "Good night, Miss Vale." As she walked away, lightning illuminated the piano, the same instrument that had carried her memory into the present. Behind her, he pressed a single key, the one that had always waited for its harmony, and let it ring until the echo faded into rain. The next day began with calm skies and a tension that hummed beneath the surface like residual thunder. Marina arrived early to finalize reports before the investors' review. The previous night's storm had left streaks across the glass facade, and she felt the faint urge to erase every mark, as if control could hide unease. Somewhere below, faint music bled into the still morning air, a private rehearsal that shouldn't have been possible at that hour. When she descended to the lobby, she found him already seated at the piano, playing quietly with the lid half closed. The melody wasn't the same unfinished one. It was an improvised prelude, slow and thoughtful. It filled the space without demanding it. She hesitated at the base of the stairs, watching his fingers move with deliberate care. "You're early," she said finally. He looked up but didn't stop playing. "You too." "I thought the lounge was off limits until the safety check." He nodded toward the window. "Couldn't sleep. Music keeps the nerves steady." You sound like someone who used to manage chaos." He smiled faintly. Something like that. She didn't ask more, though curiosity sharpened her tone. "Do you always play this piece in the morning?" "Only when the world feels loud before it starts." The manager appeared then, already irritated. "Miss Vale, I was just looking for you. We need you upstairs. As for you, Mr. Train, please limit unscheduled performances during audit hours." Elias closed the lid without protest. "Understood." Renard gave him a perfunctory nod, then turned to Marina. "You'll want to see the wiring log. The crew insists last night's flicker was caused by external surge. We can't have that during investors' stay." She followed, leaving the pianist alone again. But as they crossed the mezzanine, she caught sight of Lydia sketching in a quiet corner. The girl waved shyly. Marina smiled back, unable to explain why that small connection felt like sunlight breaking through static. Hours passed under fluorescent scrutiny. Contractors moved ladders. Inspectors clicked pens. Marina's head ached from half-listened conversations and numbers that refused to balance. By mid-afternoon, she escaped the noise for a breath of still air in the lobby. Lydia was still there, bent over her notebook. When Marina approached, the child looked up, her eyes wide but calm. "You're the lady who changed the lobby, right?" "Yes," Marina said softly. "Do you like it?" Lydia nodded. "It sounds nice when Dad plays." "That's good. Buildings are supposed to sound like the people who live in them." She hesitated, then pointed to the drawing in Lydia's lap. "What's that?" "It's Dad," the girl said. "And the lights, they keep blinking different colors." Marina frowned. "Blinking?" "Only when he plays." The words struck her oddly. She looked up toward the chandeliers. At that moment, one flickered, a quick pulse, almost rhythmic. No one else seemed to notice. Her stomach tightened. "Where's your father now?" "Storage hall," Lydia said. "He said something about checking the sound cables." Marina thanked her and walked briskly toward the back corridor. She found him near the control cabinet, crouched over an open-access panel with tools neatly arranged beside him. The scene looked wrong, not unprofessional, but too deliberate for a hotel musician. "You shouldn't be near that equipment," she said. He didn't turn around. "If I wait for maintenance, the short will spread. The conduit's hot." She crossed her arms. "You shouldn't even know that." He glanced up then, eyes steady. "Old habits. I worked with systems that used to decide whether aircraft made it home. Power surges don't scare me. They remind me to listen." She stared, thrown by the calm authority in his tone. "So the rumors are true," she murmured. He tightened a screw and closed the panel. "Rumors always are, just never completely." "I'm guessing this is the complete version?" He stood. "Once upon a time, I managed communications on bases where seconds mattered. Then I left, started over, that's all." "Why here?" she asked quietly. "Because this place doesn't need a hero. It needs someone who listens." Something inside her softened, then tightened again. "Last night, you heard the malfunction before anyone else. You could have said more. They wouldn't have listened." She wanted to argue but found no words. His logic was steady, frustratingly kind. They walked back to the lounge in silence. The manager's voice rang from across the lobby. "Ms. Vale, we're expecting a lighting demonstration tonight. Tell your team to double-check circuits." "I will," she said automatically, though her mind stayed on what she'd just learned. As evening fell, the hotel transformed again. The first guests of the day drifted in, unaware of the tension that pulsed behind the walls. The lights above them shone too bright, slightly uneven. She noted the flaw, wrote a reminder on her tablet, and paused when she heard the piano begin again. Elias was playing his unfinished song, the one she had hummed without realizing. This time, it felt less like nostalgia and more like confession. Each note lingered just long enough to pull her in. When the song reached its midpoint, he looked up from the keys and met her gaze. Neither spoke, but something passed between them, a silent recognition that erased pretense. The air shifted again, faint electricity trailing through the chandeliers. He heard it instantly, jaw tightening. "It's building again," he muttered. Marina looked around, unease crawling up her spine. "We checked the circuits. They missed something." He rose from the bench, scanning the room. "There's a resonance in the panel timing. If it syncs with the power load..." The lights pulsed once more, brighter this time. Guests gasped as a dull hum filled the lobby. Renard rushed out, waving his hands. It's fine, just voltage balancing." Elias didn't look convinced. He turned toward Marina, voice low. "If I'm right, we've got less than a day before something arcs." And as thunder rolled faintly offshore, she realized his warning didn't sound like guesswork. It sounded like certainty earned under fire. By morning, the air in the coral dune felt charged, too bright, too brittle, like the glass stretched thin. Marina spent the early hours buried in inspection paperwork, but her focus drifted back to the memory of last night, the flicker, the low hum, his steady voice cutting through chaos like a compass line. She'd laughed once at the idea of intuition in engineering. Now, she wasn't sure where logic ended and instinct began. The electricians insisted the system was stable. "New transformer installed last month," they told her. "Storm humidity throws readings off. Nothing to worry about." Their confidence felt rehearsed. She signed off the report anyway because deadlines didn't pause for uncertainty, but her pen trembled slightly on the signature line. Across the lobby, he tuned the piano again, that same unspoken ritual. Lydia sat nearby, her hair tied back with a red ribbon, humming quietly while sketching the guests. Every so often, he would glance up, scanning the lighting fixtures like a sentry watching for movement. To anyone else, it looked like absent-mindedness. To Marina, it looked like vigilance. When she finally approached, he didn't turn. "You're checking the circuit again," she said. He nodded. "It's still wrong." The sound changed. "Sound?" He tapped a key softly. The note rang pure, but his head tilted slightly. "Listen close enough, and you can tell when electricity's uneasy. It has rhythm, same as heartbeats." She folded her arms. "That's poetic for an electrician." He smiled faintly. "Old job. I used to monitor distress signals. Every frequency tells a story." "Do you ever stop listening?" "Only when I play." The words hit harder than they should have. She almost asked what had driven him to music, but the manager's sharp tone cut across the room. "Miss Vale, investor dinner at 7. Everything needs to sparkle. And Mr. Train, softer set tonight, background, not symphony." "Yes, sir," he said, polite as ever. After Renard stormed off, Marina muttered, "He treats you like furniture." He shrugged. "Furniture gets polished." Her brow furrowed. "That's not the point." "It is to me. I'm paid to keep peace in the room, not attention." She studied him for a long moment, recognizing in his calm the kind of control people only learn after surviving disorder. By evening, the hotel glowed with forced perfection. The storm outside had cleared into a strange, static twilight. Sky bruised purple, horizon burning orange. Guests gathered around tables set with crystal and linen. Waiters moved like clockwork. At the piano, he began to play. The music rolled soft and patient, filling the gaps between conversation and laughter. From her seat near the staircase, Marina kept one eye on the chandeliers. They swayed faintly, reflecting the tremor she could now feel beneath her skin. It wasn't imagination. Something pulsed in the circuitry like an unsteady heartbeat. Then, precisely as the main course arrived, the first light snapped. A sharp pop, a flare of blue-white. Gasps rippled through the room. The manager jumped to his feet. "Remain calm, everyone. Just a blown bulb." But Elias was already moving. "Turn off the central breakers," he said evenly. "Now." Renard stared at him. "You don't give orders here." "Then call someone who can." His tone carried no heat, only absolute certainty. That steadiness unnerved the manager more than shouting would have. Marina rose. "Do what he says." Before Renard could argue, a second flare erupted near the bar. Then the alarm wailed, high and shrill. Guests surged toward exits in confusion. The overhead lights strobed wildly. Elias grabbed Lydia's hand and guided her beneath the counter. "Stay down and count your breaths. Don't move until I say." She nodded without question, her trust immediate. He turned to Marina. "Find the control cabinet. Ground loops failing. I know where." Together they pushed through the panic. Waiters shouted. The manager fumbled with his phone. Guests jostled for space near the glass doors. The smell of overheated wiring thickened in the air. Somewhere upstairs, a relay tripped with a hollow boom. They reached the access hall. Sparks hissed from the panel seams. Marina hesitated, the noise too loud, the heat too close. He didn't. He tore his jacket off, wrapped it around his hand, and yanked open the outer cover. "Power routings split," he said quickly. "2 feeds, one unstable." She blinked through the haze. "You can't fix that live." "I can slow it down." He pressed both palms against the metal, feeling vibration instead of reading meters. When the rhythm goes uneven, that's the surge point. His calm made her chest tighten. He wasn't guessing. He was remembering. "What do you need?" she asked. "Main line key." She pulled it from her belt, tossed it to him. "Top panel." He caught it, turned the switch halfway, timing it with the pulse. 1, 2, snap. The lights cut out entirely, plunging the corridor into darkness. Only the emergency beacons glowed. Silence held for a full second before the alarm's mechanical voice echoed through the building. System overload averted. Manual reset required. He stepped back, breathing hard. The heat eased. The sparks died. Renard appeared at the doorway, face pale. "What did you do?" "Stopped it," Elias said. "Your system was seconds from igniting that wiring." The manager sputtered, looking from the dark panel to Marina. "Who is this guy?" She met his gaze squarely. "The reason your hotel's still standing." The sirens wound down, replaced by scattered applause from shaken guests who thought the worst was over. Elias exhaled and leaned against the wall. Marina could see the old reflexes fading from his posture, control, giving way to quiet exhaustion. When the fire marshal arrived 15 minutes later, he confirmed what Elias had already said. A faulty transformer, miswired relay. "If he hadn't killed power manually," the marshal said, "you'd have lost half this floor." Renard's expression shifted from indignation to forced gratitude. "We'll, make note of your quick thinking." Elias only nodded. Just doing what needed doing. But Marina saw something else. The way he kept scanning the room, ensuring every person had found safety. The way he checked Lydia first before himself. It wasn't performance. It was instinct, honed by years of training. And as the tension drained into relief, she realized he'd just proven more than competence. He'd proven character. The day after the fire scare, calm seemed almost unnatural. The Coral Dunes staff moved carefully, speaking in low voices, as if afraid loud noise might wake something volatile. The lobby lights glowed steady again, their brightness restored, but beneath that composure was a nervous hum everyone could feel. Guests whispered about the man at the piano, the one who'd stopped the short before it became tragedy. Even Renard, though begrudgingly, had begun to treat him with cautious respect. Elias wanted no attention. He returned to routine, wiping the keys clean, tuning by ear, pretending the previous night hadn't stripped away anonymity. Yet something had shifted. People greeted him differently now, thankful smiles, lingering glances. Even the maintenance crew nodded when he passed. It unsettled him. He'd built his peace on invisibility. Recognition felt like exposure. Marina spent the morning coordinating electricians and safety inspectors. The fire marshal's report confirmed Elias's instincts: poor grounding, outdated relays, faulty supervision. She'd signed 3 corrective orders before lunch and still couldn't quiet the memory of him standing in that corridor, hands on the live panel, eyes steady. No hesitation, no fear, just focus. When she finally saw him again, he was seated beside Lydia in the empty lounge, teaching her a simple melody. Marina hovered near the doorway, half intending to thank him again, half unsure how to begin. Lydia noticed first. "You're the lady from last night," she said cheerfully. Marina smiled. "That's me. How are you doing, sweetheart?" "Dad says we're fine," Lydia said. "He says calm is contagious." Marina's eyes softened. "He's right." Elias looked up briefly. "You shouldn't be down here during cleanup," he said, though not unkindly. "I wanted to check the new circuit readings," she replied, "and to thank you properly." He waved it off. "You already did." "Not really." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "What you did wasn't guesswork. You saved lives." He closed the lid on the piano gently. "I reacted to noise, that's all. Years of habit." She studied him, hearing the precision in his phrasing, the way he deflected with facts instead of emotion. "You talk like someone who misses command," she said quietly. "Command misses no one," he said, and something flickered in his eyes, a distant ache she recognized from her own reflection. Lydia broke the silence by playing the first few notes of his song. Her small hands missed half the chords, but the shape of the melody was there. Elias's expression softened. "She's been trying to finish it," he said. Marina crouched beside the child. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Do you know what it means?" Lydia nodded with certainty. "It means someone's coming back." Marina's throat tightened. She looked at Elias, but he avoided her gaze. "She's intuitive," he murmured. Later that afternoon, Renard called an emergency briefing for all department heads. "Corporate wants statements prepared," he announced. "Press inquiries are already coming in. We'll need an official hero narrative." Elias shifted uncomfortably. "Leave me out of it." Renard frowned. "Public acknowledgment's good for business. You'll be compensated." "I don't want compensation," Elias said. "I just want the wiring fixed." Marina interjected. "He's right. The infrastructure's still unstable. Let's focus on safety before stories." Renard's irritation returned. "Ms. Vale, I run operations, not you. And as for our pianist, he'll cooperate if he wants to stay employed." The tension thickened. Elias said nothing, but his stillness was louder than anger. Finally, Marina spoke, her tone razor-sharp. "If he hadn't acted, you wouldn't have an operation to run. Maybe consider gratitude before policy." Renard's mouth opened, then shut. The meeting dissolved soon after, his authority punctured by her composure. Outside the office, she caught Elias's eye. "I don't usually lecture superiors," she said dryly. He smiled faintly. You lecture well. Comes with building things that don't collapse. Good philosophy, he said. Maybe I should learn it. She hesitated. You built plenty that didn't collapse. You just stopped believing they could last. He looked at her then, really looked, and the years between them collapsed into silence, the same silence that had lived inside his unfinished song. That evening, as twilight deepened, he sat at the piano again. The first guests since the scare drifted in, tentative but curious. He began playing, not the waiting melody this time, but something new. It started with the same chords, yet grew warmer, steadier. Lydia sat cross-legged near the bench, drawing as he played. Marina stood near the bar, her arms folded, listening without pretending she wasn't. Midway through, the power dipped again, only a flicker, harmless but enough to make the crowd gasp. Elias didn't pause. He played through it, weaving the interruption into rhythm. The song adapted, swallowing fear into harmony. When the light steadied, applause erupted. Renard, standing in the corner, forced a smile for guests but whispered to Marina, "We'll need to reschedule the demonstration tomorrow. Power grid still unstable." She nodded absently. Her gaze stayed fixed on Elias. He wasn't performing anymore. He was commanding without orders, teaching through music what calm could mean. When the piece ended, she approached quietly. "You played through the flicker." He nodded. "Can't control storms, can control tempo. You really can't stop leading, can you?" He looked at her, weary but amused. Old habits. And for the first time since the fire, she laughed. A small, startled sound that carried through the room like the harmony his song had always waited for. The sound drew Lydia's attention. "You sound like his music," she said. Marina knelt beside the girl. Maybe his music finally remembered mine. From the piano bench, Elias didn't correct her. He simply smiled, knowing something fundamental had shifted. The crisis had revealed more than danger. It had reopened the unfinished measure of his life. And for the first time, he wanted to see where the melody might go next. Morning returned heavy with humidity, the kind that made sound travel differently through the lobby. The electricians had finished their repairs overnight, leaving behind fresh panels and a promise that the system was as good as new. But to Elias, the silence that followed a crisis was always the loudest thing in the world. He could hear the new circuits breathing, steady but uncertain, like a body still recovering from shock. He arrived early, as always, to retune the piano. Lydia trailed behind, sleepily dragging her backpack across the tiles. "You're listening again," she said, yawning. He smiled. "Old habit. Does it ever stop?" He thought about that for a moment. Only when the world stops giving me things worth listening to. She nodded, as though that made perfect sense, then climbed onto a stool nearby, sketching as he worked. For a while, they shared an easy silence. The kind of peace that didn't need explaining. By mid-morning, the calm began to crumble. The manager's voice echoed from the far corridor, sharp, insistent. "Miss Vale, corporate's arriving in an hour. I need those design updates printed and waiting in the conference room." Marina's reply was steady but clipped. "They're being uploaded now." "Uploaded? I asked for hard copies. Executives like paper. Executives also like not being electrocuted," she said, without looking up from her tablet. He huffed but didn't respond. Elias caught the exchange as she crossed the lobby, the familiar blueprint tube under her arm. She looked tired, the kind of tired that came from carrying both blame and responsibility. "Rough morning?" he asked. She gave a humorless laugh. Renard wants to host another investor dinner tonight. Says he wants to prove stability. I told him stability isn't proven with speeches. It's earned with systems that don't fail. He nodded. You're not wrong. Her eyes flicked toward him. How do you stay so calm about it all? Training, and knowing panic never fixed a circuit. She smirked. You should give seminars. Not my audience, he said softly. For a brief moment, they both smiled. Then Lydia tugged on his sleeve. Dad, can we go to the pier after work? I want to draw the sunset. Maybe, he said, if everything holds steady. Marina looked between them, warmth softening the edges of her fatigue. She remembered the way he'd spoken to his daughter during the alarm, the clarity, the composure. That same tone had guided her through architecture school once, when a professor told her that precision and empathy couldn't coexist. She'd proven him wrong. Now, watching Elias, she realized he had built his life around the same contradiction. Afternoon turned to evening in a slow, amber fade. The hotel filled again, voices rising like static under chandeliers. The atmosphere was forced, like laughter at a wake. Corporate representatives in pressed suits roamed the lobby, murmuring praise for quick recovery and excellent staff coordination. Elias played in the background, offering a soundtrack of restraint. During a break, Marina joined him at the piano, resting one hand lightly on the polished lid. Do you ever finish that song? Not yet, he said. Maybe tonight. She hesitated. Can I ask why you never did? He considered her question. Because the person it was meant for disappeared before I could. Her breath caught. And if that person came back? He met her gaze. Then I'd stop waiting. The manager's voice sliced through their moment. Ms. Vale, upstairs, now. She straightened, professionalism snapping into place. Duty calls, she murmured. He gave a slight nod. Be careful of the upper circuits, they still hum unevenly. I'll keep that in mind. As she disappeared into the stairwell, Lydia sidled up beside him. You like her? He raised an eyebrow. That obvious? She looks like the song, Lydia said simply. He chuckled under his breath. Maybe she does. Minutes later, the first sign arrived, a faint pop from the ceiling, subtle but real. His fingers froze mid-note. He looked up. One chandelier flickered, then steadied. Guests barely noticed, but he did. His instincts flared. He scanned the ceiling, tracing the pattern of lights leading toward the upper corridor, toward her. Lydia, stay with the hostess, he said quickly. What's wrong? Just stay, sweetheart. I'll be right back. He moved fast but calm, weaving through guests toward the stairwell. On the second landing, smoke thinned into view, just a wisp curling, from a junction box near the ceiling. Sparks danced along the wire insulation. Marina was there already, tablet still in hand, staring up at the anomaly. It's starting again, she said, voice tight. Step back, he ordered. Can you fix it? Yes, but I need the relay code. She handed over her device. There. Override keys built in. He crouched, accessed the maintenance interface, and began rerouting voltage to the backup line. The panel beeped, red, then amber, then green. The smoke thinned instantly. Done, he said, standing. Shorts neutralized. She exhaled shakily. You shouldn't have to keep saving this building. He shrugged. Some places need more patience than repair. Their eyes met again. Closer now than they'd been in years they'd both lost. Neither spoke of the night 12 years earlier. They didn't need to. The air between them carried its own confession. Downstairs, Lydia's sketchbook lay open on a table. Across one page, she'd drawn her father at the piano, a woman standing beside him, both surrounded by light. The caption beneath read, "The night the song finally ended." Back on the landing, Marina said softly, "You're going to finish it tonight, aren't you?" He smiled faintly. "If the power holds, yes." "It will," she said, and for the first time since meeting him, she sounded sure. He glanced toward the lobby, hearing Lydia's laughter float up through the atrium. Then maybe it's time. And as they descended together, side by side, the lobby lights held steady, bright, silent, waiting for the final note neither had dared play until now. Subscribe with the bell on, because sometimes the quietest stories end in the loudest truths. The Coral Dunes night air smelled of rain and ozone again, though no storm was forecast. It was the kind of stillness that came before change. Soft, holding its breath. Elias sat at the piano, playing low, almost hesitant chords that wandered but refused to land. Around him, the lobby glowed in subdued gold. Lydia sat nearby, her head tilted against the armrest, sketchbook still open across her lap, her pencil sliding toward sleep. Marina lingered by the far column, one hand resting against cool marble, pretending she was only listening. But she was watching. She'd spent the entire day replaying the smoke and the sparks, the sound of his voice commanding through chaos. What struck her most wasn't the courage, it was the ease. He hadn't flinched, hadn't waited for permission. He had simply acted like a man who'd done it before. "Do you ever stop hearing danger?" she asked when the last note faded. He turned slowly, surprised she'd spoken. "Only when the world gives me quiet worth trusting. And tonight?" Still deciding. She smiled faintly, stepping closer. "You saved this place twice in as many days. You're allowed to rest." He shook his head. "Rest comes after. Certainty. You mean, after control." He looked up at her, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. "Control's just the name we give what we can't admit we fear." The piano light caught the edge of his face, sharpening the fatigue beneath calm. He wasn't hiding heroism, he was carrying the cost of it. And somehow, that realization hurt her more than she expected. Before she could reply, the elevator chimed. Renard stepped out, phone pressed to his ear. "Yes, sir. Full restoration by tomorrow. No, there's no risk. We had a technician on site, handled it internally." Elias's gaze narrowed. "Technician?" Renard ended the call, straightening his tie. "Corporate wants a clean report. You'll get a thank you letter, Mr. Train, but no headlines. Let's keep this quiet." Marina's voice cooled. "You're downplaying a near electrical fire for optics?" "Optics keep hotels open?" Renard snapped. "Not every incident needs a hero narrative." Elias stood slowly. "Some incidents need truth." Renard's jaw tightened. "You're a pianist, not a safety inspector. Don't mistake luck for expertise." The words struck hard. Marina saw Elias's posture shift, still calm, but the kind of stillness that comes before a decisive move. He didn't raise his voice. "Luck didn't read your wiring logs before dinner. Luck didn't know your secondary relay was drawing 60% over safe limit." Renard faltered. "How?" "Because your technician used mismatched gauge wire to save costs," Elias said. "That's not luck, that's training." Marina stepped in. "And authority," she added sharply. "You're speaking to someone who understands electrical command systems better than your entire maintenance staff combined." Renard's bluster faltered. "I don't care what he used to be, he's a musician now." "Maybe," Elias said softly, "but I still hear the hum that tells me you're lying." The silence that followed was unbearable. Renard muttered something about corporate policy and retreated to his office. The lobby seemed to breathe easier once he was gone. Marina sat across from him, half smiling despite the tension. "You really don't know how to stay invisible, do you?" He exhaled slowly. "I tried, didn't take." Lydia stirred then, blinking awake. "Dad?" He brushed her hair back gently. "Go on, sweetheart, almost bedtime." She yawned. "Are you done fixing everything now?" He hesitated. "Almost." Marina knelt beside the girl. "He fixed more than the lights," she said quietly. Lydia looked between them, curious. "What else?" "Something that needed finishing," Marina said, her eyes never leaving Elias's. When the girl went upstairs with the night attendant, silence stretched again. Only this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was charged with something unspoken, unfinished. Marina broke it first. 12 years ago, she said, softly. You waited for someone who never came. He didn't deny it. "I remember." "She wanted to," Marina whispered. "She just didn't get the chance." He looked at her, the old ache returning to his eyes, but softer now. "You?" She nodded once. "My brother's car accident happened that night. I spent it in the hospital. By the time I checked your message, it felt too late to explain." He leaned back slowly, absorbing the words like music, resolving after too long. "And yet here we are," he murmured. "Here we are," she echoed. The lights above flickered once, just once, harmless, almost like punctuation. He smiled faintly. "Still imperfect." "So are we," she said. He stood, motioned to the bench. "Then maybe it's time to play something that ends." She sat beside him, uncertain, her fingers brushing the keys. "You'll finish it?" "Not alone," he said. He began the melody softly, the same one that had haunted the hotel every night. This time, when the suspended chord came, she added the harmony. Steady, simple, exact. The missing note. The sound filled the lobby, warm and whole. Guests turned from their conversations, drawn by instinct to stillness. The music carried a truth no announcement could deliver, that some songs end only when both halves return to the same room. When the final chord faded, no one spoke. Not even the chandeliers dared to flicker. Marina exhaled. That was the song, wasn't it? The one that waited. He nodded. Now it's done. And though the night outside pressed dark against the glass, the coral dune finally felt alive. Steady lights, grounded systems, and two people who'd stopped running from the same melody. The next morning began with applause from the staff. A rare, spontaneous thing. Someone had filmed a short clip of the duet from last night. The pianist and the architect finishing a song that had lingered unfinished for years. By sunrise, the clip had spread through the hotel's internal network, gathering quiet admiration. It wasn't just music. It was proof the coral dune had survived something deeper than a power surge. Elias didn't know about the video until he entered the lobby and found strangers smiling at him with recognition. "Beautiful piece," a guest murmured. Another said, "That harmony, it gave me chills." He nodded politely, pretending gratitude while trying to ignore how exposed he felt. Marina arrived not long after, carrying rolled plans under her arm and the faintest trace of embarrassment in her eyes. "Seems the hotel found its new anthem," she said. He half smiled. "Accidental fame, my least favorite kind." "You'll survive it," she replied, setting her plans on the table. "Corporate wants to include you in the next press release. They think it makes a good redemption narrative. Safety, artistry, human spirit." He frowned. "I'm not part of their marketing." "Neither am I," she said quietly, "but sometimes being seen helps the right things get fixed faster." He studied her face for a moment. There was no pretense in her tone. She wasn't suggesting fame. She was suggesting accountability. "You're not letting Renard spin this," he said. She shook her head. "Not this time." Across the room, Renard was already on his phone, pacing. His voice carried phrases like corporate alignment and image control. Every step he took reminded Elias of the fragility of truth in bureaucratic hands. Later that afternoon, the board assembled in the mezzanine lounge, a temporary council of suits and ambition. They congratulated each other for swift crisis management and recovered investor confidence. Marina sat among them, calm but unreadable. Elias stood a few paces away, playing background music because that's what they expected him to do. Renard began his presentation with polished precision. "As you can see, we contained the event quickly, maintained order, and ensured guest safety. The entire team acted with professionalism." Someone asked about the manual power cut. "A musician handled that?" Renard cleared his throat. "Yes, though under guidance, of course. Nothing reckless. The staff followed chain of command." Marina's gaze sharpened. She waited for the right moment, then spoke clearly. "That's inaccurate. There was no chain of command. He acted alone when your oversight failed." Renard blinked, smile cracking. "Ms. Vale, with all respect—" "No," she interrupted, her tone calm but final. "With all respect, you're rewriting events to hide negligence. The relay installation violated electrical code. He prevented a fire." The room went silent. The executives looked from her to Elias, then back again. Renard stammered. "You're implying—" "I'm confirming," she said. "Your shortcuts nearly killed people. I've attached the inspection report to every board email on this floor." Gasps followed. Phones buzzed with notifications. Renard's face drained of color. Elias kept playing softly, his hands steady on the keys. The notes seemed to underscore each word she spoke. He hadn't asked for vindication, but she'd delivered it anyway. When the meeting adjourned, chaos swirled. Executives whispering, Renard storming out, phones lighting up with new directives. Marina walked toward the piano, her composure unbroken. He looked up. "You didn't have to do that." "I did," she said simply. "Truth only matters if someone's willing to say it out loud." He closed the lid over the keys. "And you?" "I've been quiet long enough," she said. Outside, Lydia ran in from the veranda, clutching her sketchbook. "Dad, look!" She flipped it open to reveal a new drawing. The hotel, glowing with light, surrounded by musical notes that rose like birds. He smiled. "It's perfect." Marina leaned over to look. "You gave it wings." Lydia nodded solemnly. "Because songs shouldn't stay in cages." That evening, corporate sent an email confirming Renard's suspension pending investigation. The lobby felt lighter, the staff almost buoyant. Guests lingered longer, chatting near the piano as if drawn by invisible gravity. The Coral Dune, once a sterile resort, now pulsed with something alive, a community. When the last guest drifted away, Marina returned to the piano. "You know," she said softly, "for someone who hates attention, you've managed to start a movement." He chuckled. "All I did was fix a panel." "You did more than that," she said. "You reminded people what listening looks like." He turned slightly toward her. "And you reminded me why it matters to finish what we start." For a long moment neither spoke. The quiet between them wasn't empty. It was full of everything unsaid but understood. Finally, he asked, "Do you still design sound into your spaces?" "Always," she said. "You?" "I still build silence where it's needed." They looked at each other then, two architects of different languages meeting in the same structure. Lydia peeked from the staircase. "Are you playing again?" Elias smiled. "One last time before dinner." He opened the piano, and Marina sat beside him. The first notes were simple, unhurried. He played the melody's spine. She filled the spaces between. The music rose through the atrium, carrying fragments of rain and memory, of circuits and redemption. Outside, dusk melted into violet. The hotel lights held steady. No flicker, no hum, only harmony. And somewhere within that steady glow, the song that had once been unfinished found its rightful ending, not with applause, but with peace. The Coral Dune entered its calmest week in years. The new circuits held steady, the staff worked without panic, and guests began booking longer stays. What had once been a hotel of sterile luxury now carried a strange warmth. Music in the mornings, laughter by the fountain at night. The crisis that nearly destroyed it had, somehow, rewired it into something human. Elias played every evening, though his sets had changed. He no longer hid behind repetition or routine. The melodies breathed, adapting to the pulse of the room. Sometimes he'd glance up to find Marina standing by the bar, arms crossed, listening with that look of quiet concentration that reminded him of how she'd once studied blueprints, like they were confession and promise combined. Lydia had become the unofficial mascot of the hotel. Guests gave her pencils, notebooks, even asked for copies of her drawings. Her latest sketch hung in the staff lounge, the Coral Dune under starlight, surrounded by musical notes instead of waves. Beneath it, she had written in tidy handwriting, "You can fix walls and wires, but people need songs." That afternoon, Marina called Elias to the mezzanine conference room. "Board follow-up," she said, tone measured but not tense. They finished their review. He followed her upstairs, expecting another round of corporate ceremony. But when they entered, only one person waited, an older executive with a kind but shrewd face. "Mr. Train," he greeted, standing, "we owe you gratitude, and perhaps an apology." Elias raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For assuming silence equals insignificance," the man said. "Your actions saved our property and our reputation. We'd like to offer you a permanent role, safety coordinator with full benefits. You'd still play if you wish." He blinked, caught between disbelief and unease. "That's generous, but it's fair," Marina interjected. "It's acknowledgement." The executive smiled. "We'll leave the paperwork with Miss Vale." After he left, Elias exhaled. "You set that up." "I recommended you," she corrected. "There's a difference." "Why?" "Because you're already doing the job," she said. "You listen, you protect, you teach. Titles should catch up to reality." He studied her quietly. "You could have taken credit," she shrugged. "You could have let the place burn." That drew a small laugh from him, the first real one she'd heard. "You always talk like you're designing something, even when it's people." "Architecture's not about walls," she said. "It's about what happens inside them." Their eyes met, and for the first time, it didn't feel like looking across distance. It felt like looking into recognition. Later that night, the hotel hosted its first gala since reopening. The lobby was dressed in white orchids and low candlelight, the kind of beauty that required no translation. Elias played at the piano, while servers glided between tables. He noticed Lydia watching from a corner, chin resting on her hands, eyes glowing with pride. Marina joined him between sets, dressed simply in black. "Corporate wants me to take over as operations lead," she said, sitting beside him. He looked up. "You'll do it?" "I think so. I'm tired of designing buildings for people I never meet." "You'll make them listen." "Only if you keep reminding them what listening sounds like," she said, smiling faintly. He began another song, slow, gentle, not one of his usual pieces. This one unfolded like memory retold in real time. When the melody reached its heart, she realized it was new, a lullaby threaded with fragments of old themes, but softer now, almost tender. "What's this one called?" she asked quietly. He paused over the keys. "Blueprints." Her throat tightened. "That's not fair." "Art rarely is," he said, smiling. The song lingered even after it ended. Guests clapped politely, unaware they'd just witnessed something sacred. Marina stayed seated long after the applause faded. "You wrote it today," she said. "This morning," he admitted. "Woke up thinking about everything we built without realizing it." "Built?" He gestured subtly around them, the staff moving with ease, the light holding steady, Lydia sketching near the fountain. "None of this existed before the fire. The wiring's new. The people are different. You and I," she finished for him. "We started over." For a moment, neither spoke. Then she asked, "Do you regret waiting all those years?" He considered it. No. Waiting gave the song time to find its ending. "And if it hadn't?" He looked at her, voice steady. "Then I'd still play it. Some things are worth the echo." Across the lobby, Lydia yawned and stretched, her sketchbook falling open to a half-finished drawing of 3 figures beneath glowing lights. Marina smiled, nodding toward her. "She's growing up fast." "She reminds me what courage sounds like," Elias said. "Courage?" He nodded. "To believe light can hold." The words hung between them, simple, true, heavier than they seemed. Outside, the rain started again, soft and forgiving. The chandeliers shimmered under its reflected rhythm, no longer flickering, just steady. Marina turned back to him. "You know what happens next, right?" He grinned. "You'll tell me." "You play the closing set," she said, "and I make sure the lights don't fail this time." He laughed quietly, shifting to the next song. "Deal." When he began to play, she stood beside him, not as an architect or supervisor, but as someone who had finally stopped running from the sound that had followed her for 12 years. And as the notes rose through the atrium, calm and full, it became clear to everyone listening that this was no longer just a hotel. It was a space reborn from fire, stitched together by music, truth, and 2 people who had remembered how to listen. The final evening at the Coral Dune unfolded like a quiet celebration no one had officially planned. The last of the investors had gone home, the guests were settled in their rooms, and the staff moved through the lobby with the kind of ease that comes only after surviving something together. The lights glowed steady and warm, their reflections soft across the marble. Elias sat at the piano, fingertips resting lightly on the keys. He wasn't playing yet, just listening, to the hum of the building, to the faint sound of waves breaking beyond the terrace, to the small heartbeat of peace that now pulsed through the hotel. After so much noise, alarms, panic, denial, it was the silence that struck him most. Lydia was sprawled on a sofa nearby, coloring her latest drawing. She'd filled a whole sketchbook since the fire. Pages of pianos and stars and smiling faces under chandeliers that no longer threatened to fall. Each picture carried a rhythm, the kind of steady heartbeat that had returned to their lives. Marina appeared quietly beside him. She was dressed in light linen tonight, hair loose, tablet left upstairs for once. "You're early," she said. "Force of habit," he replied. "I wanted to hear the building before the music started." "Still listening to the circuits?" she teased. He smiled. "Always." She leaned against the piano, watching him for a long moment. "The board approved your new title this morning. You're officially the Coral Dunes Safety and Sound Coordinator. They want to announce it at the weekend dinner." He laughed softly. "That's a mouthful. It's accurate. I'd rather just keep playing." "You will," she said, "but now people will know why it matters." He looked at her then, expression unreadable but kind. "You sound proud." "I am," she admitted, "of you, of all of this." Their conversation fell into the same gentle rhythm that had carried them through every crisis. Unhurried, honest, unspoken in all the right ways. Outside, rain began again, not violent this time, but soft and rhythmic. The lights flickered once, like a reflex, then held. He smiled at the ceiling. "Even storms know when to stop testing you." Marina followed his gaze. "Or maybe the wiring finally trusts the builder." He turned to her. "And the builder trusts the listener." She laughed quietly. "You always know how to make metaphors out of maintenance. Every system's a language," he said. "You just have to learn what it's trying to say." Lydia stirred at the sound of their voices, stretching. "Are you going to play, Dad?" "Yeah," he said, smiling. "This one's for you." He adjusted the bench and began the first notes of the melody, the same song that had carried them all through the chaos. But this time, it wasn't the sound of waiting or remembering, it was completion. Each chord came confident, grounded, shaped by everything that had happened between them. Marina didn't move away. She stayed beside him, one hand resting on the piano, her presence steady. The song built toward its quiet peak, every note threaded with something human. Gratitude, forgiveness, new beginnings. When the final chord came, it didn't fade. It lingered, resonating through the glass, into the rain, into the people who had gathered at the edges of the lobby to listen in silence. When it ended, applause didn't follow. Instead, the kind of hush that carries weight filled the room. The kind that says everyone has felt something real and doesn't want to break it. Lydia climbed onto the bench beside her father, pressing one small hand on top of his. "You finished it." He nodded. "We all did." Marina met his gaze. "What now?" He looked around. The guests, the staff, the warm light, the reflection of the rain. "Now," he said, "we keep it alive." The moment felt like closure, but it wasn't the end. It was transformation. The Coral Dune, once defined by luxury and arrogance, had become something else entirely. A sanctuary rebuilt by truth and sound. Every repair, every note, every act of courage had rewired not just the circuits, but the people inside them. Later that night, after Lydia had gone upstairs and the staff began closing the bar, Marina lingered by the fountain. He found her there, watching the ripples. "You ever think," she said softly, "that maybe this was supposed to happen? The storm, the fire, all of it?" He stood beside her, hands in his pockets. "Maybe not supposed to, but maybe necessary." "Why?" "Because sometimes things have to break before they can make music again." She smiled, eyes glinting under the soft lobby lights. "You always have an answer." He shook his head. "Not an answer, just a song." As the rain slowed, he took one last look at the lobby. The glow of the chandeliers, the sound of calm, the faint echo of harmony still hanging in the air. Then he turned back to her, his voice quiet but certain. "You know, it's strange. I used to play to fill the silence. Now, I play because I trust it." She nodded, eyes warm. "And that's how I'll build from now on. Rooms that know how to listen." Outside, dawn began pushing light through the storm clouds, pale and new. The Coral Dune would open to another day of guests, another rhythm of laughter and footsteps, another chance to prove that harmony wasn't a one-time miracle. It was maintenance, care, and courage woven together. As they stood there, side by side, the last note of the night belonged to the building itself. A hum, low and alive, steady as breath. Subscribe and don't miss our next story. Title: Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next?